Alrighty, kiddos, let me put this pointer thingy away here and turn on me laser pointer. So, picking this up where we were left off yesterday, the election of 1896 and William McKinley's election as the 25th president of the United States. So, just to sort of reiterate and go back to where we had started from, uh, I had mentioned that you really should be looking at the 1896 election as being the first modern election in U.S. history, more or less. It's it really is. It has a lot of the characteristics of what we would see in modern elections. Money, both parties, but specifically the Republicans, raise money for their candidate in a very business model approach. And the two parties begin relying more on uh, strategy rather than the candidate itself. Now, this is especially realize that most of what I'm talking about here is applicable more to the Republicans. So the parties, specifically the Republicans in this case, really try to target areas that will play to their candidate's strength. So, just as an example, um, like in 1868 or 1872, it would have been something to say, vote for Grant. Well, why? Well, because he's Ulysses S. Grant. That's why. Okay, by 1896, nobody really cares that William McKinley is a Civil War veteran. Um, and in fact, this will be the last time that we have to worry about the waving of the old nasty bloody shirt because it just doesn't become a thing anymore. It's especially after the war in 1898, people kind of distance themselves from the Civil War thing. Um, it's McKinley, the strategy that Mark Hanna uses is to focus on tariffs, which Brian can't really talk about. And he sort of builds this idea that McKinley will protect American business and provide prosperity through a dual system of tariffs and the gold standard, and that McKinley's experience makes him very uniquely sort of qualified to do this. Um, it's also kind of modern in the sense that media really plays a big part in manipulating, for lack of a better word, how the voting goes. Most major newspapers support McKinley. This goes even for Democratic newspapers. Um, Bryan's just too nuts for them. One notable exception, however, is William Randolph Hearst's New York Journal. They Hearst himself was very anti-McKinley. He had his own agenda of things he wanted to accomplish, and McKinley wasn't necessarily going to cooperate with those. And Hearst really did not necessarily an inaccurate. It may have been a little bit too judgmental sort of portrayal of McKinley as simply being a tool and a puppet of Mark Hanna. In this cartoon here, you can see here's McKinley hanging on a little hook chain from the arm of Mark Hanna, which is wearing a suit made out of money. Hearst is really one of the first people in America to go after this idea that that much of politics is supported by money, and that money will make things happen. I think while a lot of people knew that, this is really kind of unique in the fact that it's a very direct attack on McKinley as being a puppet of big money. Ironically enough, William Randolph Hearst was a multimillionaire too. You can go visit his house, the Hearst Castle, out in California if you ever have a chance. It's a kind of a kooky place. Um, so between media support, uh, Brian wigging people out with his cross of gold speech and its religious overtones that did not make people happy, and the sort of fiery rhetoric of progressive populism that Brian wielded. McKinley easily wins. He wins by over 600,000 votes, and won 95 more electoral college votes. And this was largely due to the way that Mark Hanna ran his campaign. But to give, got to give credit where it's due, he still won. He's the 25th president. Now, what's really kind of interesting is McKinley's inaugural address. So, one of the things that I personally love about this unit is we're entering into a time period where there's some really major changes. I don't Probably most of you were unaware that William McKinley is the first president to ride in an automobile. He's also the first president to be filmed and not photographed. I mean, filmed, and his inauguration was filmed, which I'll post a link to that on the lessons today. Um, McKinley may not have been the gifted speaker that Brian was, and he certainly owed much of his success to Mark Hanna. But McKinley was not stupid. And in giving his inaugural address, McKinley sort of very deftly and very aptly worked his way through one of the big sticking points in something that the Democrats, but specifically uh, the sort of the third parties, kind of went after him for, and that was about the idea of the U.S. intervening or supporting foreign wars and conflicts. Because remember, at this time, the Republicans openly supported the idea of the U.S. getting behind rebels in both Cuba and Armenia. And McKinley, also there's the idea of taking over, islands in the Caribbean and stuff. McKinley, in his inaugural address, makes very clear that what he is looking for is American prosperity, and maybe more significantly, we stay out of foreign affairs. No intervening in other countries' problems or messes, no wars to gain territory. But, and it's a big but, don't go there. If the US is attacked, then we will defend ourselves. So we'll pick this up tomorrow looking at the US involvement in Cuba and our problems with Spain. Peace and love.